It hasn't happened often recently, but the Cardinals did drop another series over the weekend, losing 2 of 3 to the Texas Rangers. What's going on with the offense lately? And we got to talk about Erick Fedde as well, all coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday evening, June 1st. 2025. The Cardinals drop one on Sunday afternoon to the Texas Rangers, 8-1, a final score that was a lot uglier than really the majority of the game was for the Cardinals, but things did get out of hand late, and the Cardinals fell pretty convincingly, which happened twice in this series. But you know what? The Cardinals only lost this series by one game, even though they lost on the run differential by like 16 runs. They got beat up pretty bad on Friday. They took a very slim victory on Saturday thanks to the pitching performance of Sonny Gray. And then it was more of the same offensively for the Cardinals on Sunday. And late in that game, the Rangers exercising some frustrations and taking it out on the Cardinals a little bit because their offensive season hasn't been very potent, but they sure did look potent over the weekend. But for the Cardinals to have the weekend that they did, scoring only 4 total runs in the series and still winning a game, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. I think the results were worse than the degree to which it will impact the team moving forward. But we'll talk about tonight on b-schaeff Daily, the Erick Fedde outing and just maybe the general, maybe malaise would be the word that I would use. And, he was good. The box score indicates 6 innings, 2 runs. He was perfectly adequate in this game and really has been all season long for the Cardinals. But I saw maybe a disproportionate amount of frustration from Cardinals fans on social media about Erick Fedde, especially during this outing. And I want to try to pinpoint a little bit of why that might be and what our overall takeaway is about Fedde's season. He's got a 3.82 ERA, which on paper, again, that's more than fine, because if you had a rotation full of those types of guys, which the Cardinals in many ways do right now, you can get away with that and be a pretty decent rotation as long as you have a good offense to go with it and a bullpen that gets the job done and can slam the door in the close games that you're ahead. That's a recipe that can work for the Cardinals. But something about Erick Fedde this year, watching him pitch, has not been all too pleasant relative to the very capable and adequate 3.82 ERA. So we'll talk about that and then generally give our take on our opinions on the offense right now, because it certainly did struggle over the weekend. And is that something to be concerned about moving forward, or is it just one of those baseballisms that should hopefully correct itself as the Cardinals get started with a lengthy homestand beginning on Tuesday this week? So that's what's coming up on b-schaeff Daily tonight. Going to keep it relatively brief because I've got to get up pretty early in the morning on Monday. But wanted to make sure to hop on here real quick, give you guys my take from what we saw over the weekend and in particular on Sunday. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy daily Cardinals content all season long, win or lose. This is the place to come for it, so you can subscribe or follow b-schaeff Daily over on Spotify if you like to listen to the podcast on that app. Let's go ahead and jump right into it, though. Erick Fedde, 6 innings, 2 runs allowed in the game on Sunday. He was opposed by Jacob deGrom, and deGrom was good. We know that he is, and we know how capable he can be. I believe was dealing with a little bit of an injury issue, which maybe helped the Cardinals out. I guess it didn't help them because they didn't score off the bullpen either, but that got deGrom out of the game after 6 innings and only 81 pitches. But overall, 6 innings, 1 run. I mean, he held the Cardinals down pretty good. He's improved his ERA to 2.34 on the season. But on the other side, Fedde's numbers weren't all too dissimilar. If you just look at the 6 innings and the 2 runs allowed, he had the Cardinals in this game for sure. The second inning was the troubled spot for Erick Fedde. And other than that, he was clean in terms of runs allowed. Didn't give up anything outside of the Josh Smith double that plated a couple of runs in the second inning, and that's all that Fedde gave up. But he had 3 walks in the game as well. He had the general feeling that the Texas Rangers, if they got guys on base, were going to have not too much of a problem advancing them via stolen base. Smith had a stolen base. Wyatt Langford had one. Semien had one as well. All 3 coming off of Erick Fedde in this game. And boy, does he just not really seem to hold the runners on. I mean, that is a problem we talked a lot about last year when we would dive into the numbers for the Cardinal catching crew. And it really didn't seem to matter whether it was Wilson Contreras or whether it was Pedro Paez or certainly Ivan Herrera. Those guys struggled in managing the running game last year but it was largely, I think, something that you couldn't pin down to any particular catcher. It was a pervasive problem with the Cardinals pitching staff where they just didn't do a very good job of holding runners. And I don't know quite the degree to which that has improved this season, but I think it does feel generally better. And like Pages has a pretty solid rate throwing runners out on stolen base attempts this year. Obviously, it went down a little bit today. He was behind the plate for the Cardinals in this one. But generally, I feel like it's improved compared to what it was last year. Because even Pages, who has a pretty solid arm and does a nice job back there, didn't have a chance last season. Herrera, we know that, that's a weakness of his game. But last year, it's like, well, how much can you attribute that to Herrera and how much should you attribute it to the pitchers not really doing a very good job of holding the runners and delivering quickly to the plate? Erick Fedde doesn't really do either. He doesn't really hold the runners, and he certainly doesn't deliver quickly to the plate. And that was something the Rangers were able to take advantage of. And I consider a lot of what we saw in the run game to be a Fedde thing more so than a Pages thing. The proof of which is maybe the fact that Pages actually picked somebody off of second base after a replay review. I mean, threw behind the runner at second. How often do you see that? So certainly when we think about managing the running game and the stolen bases allowed, I'm not generally going to put very much, if any of that, on Pages if the guy is, when he's given the opportunity, actually throwing guys out, straying too far from the base when they're at second. You might backpick at first. You maybe could see it at third. At second is almost unheard of, and it happened and looked like he got him live, and I'm glad the Cardinals decided to challenge that, and upon review, it was a close play for sure, but I think they got that one right. Pages deserves the credit for it. But it just kind of traces back to, for me, man, something about Erick Fedde this year. Just watching him pitch has been an unpleasant experience for people. I'm basing that off of what I see on social media and the comments of just the way that his season has gone, which is a little bit strange because, again, he had that complete game shutout. That was a really cool moment in Washington, D.C., and his overall numbers are totally, totally fine. Today, he was fine. 6 innings, 2 runs is a quality start, and it's not even like the lowest qualification for a quality start. You could have given up another earned run and still would have had one. So let me know your experience with this, Cardinals fans. How are you feeling about Erick Fedde? I think part of it is when we look at guys like Fedde just kind of, pushing his way, grinding his way through an outing, and the end of the game numbers are often okay because he's got decent numbers for the season. A 3.8 ERA is nothing to sneeze at. But we got a guy like him, and he's walking guys, pitching to contact, walking guys. Andre Palante, kind of the same thing, and with even less success so far this year. His ERA is about 4.2. And then you got Michaelis, who I think has been certainly much better in recent weeks. Prior to his last outing was a little bit of a dud, but he had, a really good run to be able to take his ERA all the way down to 3.5 at his best. I think he's sitting around 3.9 right now. When you've got a rotation where there's 3 of the 5 guys really kind of have those characteristics when you're watching them pitch, it's more to contact, not a ton of swing and miss. Michaelis doesn't really walk too many guys, but Palante and Fedde have both had that issue this year. And you know that Michael McGreevy is sitting there in Memphis just waiting to be used. I think that's part of it. I think that's part of why people have such a visceral frustration with watching Erick Fedde. Maybe I'm overselling it, though. What is your opinion? You're a Cardinals fan out there listening to this podcast. You're clearly locked in on what's going on with the team. I really want to hear from you guys. Am I overselling this? Am I misinterpreting the social media kind of fervor toward this topic? Or is there some legitimacy to this where it's like, you might not even know exactly why you feel the way that you do because you look at the numbers and you're a smart fan and you're like, I shouldn't really feel so strongly because his numbers are totally fine, more than acceptable. But something about Erick Fedde, I think, has gotten on people's nerves recently. I don't know if that's fair or unfair to him, if it's stylistic, if it's the fact that anytime you see somebody just pitching maybe a little bit below what you want to see, in terms of either effectiveness or, again, because the results were fine. I want to make sure I keep reiterating that you'll take 6 innings and 2 runs allowed every day of the week. I don't care who's pitching. That's a 3 ERA. That will give you a chance to win every single time you're out there. Even against deGrom, they had a chance to win, but it ended up not going that way. What's your opinion of Erick Fedde so far this season, Cardinals fans? Let me know. I'm curious to read these comments throughout the day on Monday and maybe even Tuesday if there's some folks listening to this because the Cardinals have the off day on Monday, so maybe we'll have a little more legs to this podcast. Just specific to the game on Sunday, I thought it was an interesting moment late where Oli Marmol decides to go for it with offense. I think it was the 7th inning. You have Nolan Gorman against Sean Armstrong, and Cardinals fans familiar with him from last year. He was briefly with the Cardinals after being acquired at the deadline for Dylan Carlson from Tampa Bay, and he's doing an okay job now in that Texas bullpen. Cardinals saw him a couple of times throughout this series, but that was a matchup where you have the age-old question, do you take Pedro Pages out, right? Because Oli has been very clear about how he feels about him behind the plate, and again, I feel like when you're back picking at second base, you're doing something right, and it's a lot more than that with Pages. His catcher ERA is far lower than anybody else that has been behind the plate this season. I don't know how much that is a product of his qualities or if it's just random noise that would level out over a larger sample, but it has really seemed to be that the pitchers have been very comfortable throwing to him. And comfortable pitchers often leads to better performing pitchers. And this is not necessarily like it was a couple of years ago with Wilson Contreras, the pitchers throwing him under the bus and saying they weren't so comfortable throwing to him. Like, I think you have a pretty good rotation at this point in time, whereas maybe then, there were some guys that were having their own issues on the mound and were using Contreras as the excuse. That would be the way that I came down on that. I've been pretty clear that I didn't think Wilson got a fair shake in that whole debacle. But it's not that they're necessarily the pitchers are mutinying against anybody else, whether it's Pozo or Herrera. I just think there's clearly been an effectiveness, a sharpness to the way those Pages outings have often gone. And look, today, I would say that Fedde wasn't at his sharpest necessarily, but the results were there and that they were able to get through 6 innings of 2-run baseball. But Oli goes for it with a runner on first base, 1 out, pinch hitting for Pedro Pages, basically taking the shot, and then later in the inning, if you're watching on Roku, you didn't see it. The Roku broadcast was a train wreck, I will admit. I was giving the PSA out on Sunday morning that, look, the RokuChannel.com and the Roku app, it is free. You're able to watch this game. Even if you don't think you can watch this game. But I wasn't anticipating they just would have commercials and advertisements for the Roku channel movies in the middle of innings. Like, they'd make a pitching change and they wouldn't come back. It happened a couple of times where I was like, I could have swore that this has been a pretty long break. And then you look and you go, well, shoot, man, the inning's over. What the heck happened? Well, that was what happened with the Ryan Vilade at bat there as well. But nevertheless, it was Oli Marmol taking his shot with pinch hitters in that inning, and he'd take out Victor Scott and Pedro Pages to do it. That is a change compared to what we'd seen recently, but I think Oli felt it was their best chance with Armstrong in there. That's a guy that, with the Cardinals, he wasn't that great of a pitcher. He wasn't that great when the Cardinals traded for him. Maybe the thought was, Oli's like, look, I've seen this Armstrong guy, and this is going to be our best chance we get the rest of the game. If they get through the 7th unscathed, they got better relievers coming out for the 8th and 9th. I didn't say that out loud, but you kind of get the sense that normally Oli is ready to kind of let this thing play out a little bit more and make sure he keeps a good defense out there. Has been a big impetus behind the decisions that he's made when he has decided in other moments not to pinch hit for guys like Pedro Pages. But also, this was the 7th inning. I feel like some of those other instances of late had been in the 6th. And so they took their shot with Gorman. They did what I think a lot of fans had wanted to see in other instances over the past few weeks. And usually holding serve with Pages has been the choice because he's not only the starting catcher for this team, the primary catcher, he's the finishing catcher in those close games. And Oli has valued the way that Pedro Pages behind the plate just seems to be a way for the Cardinals to keep the score close. And then you try to find that run to scratch across and make a game of it. But I guess in this instance, like I said, the feeling was, hey, they needed to score here, or they maybe weren't going to. That is the way that it played out, but it also played out that the Cardinals weakened their defense, and there was a throwing error on Pozo, who came into the game on a bunt play right in front of home plate, skipped the throw. It was a forced play, at second. A play that Mason Wynn normally makes for sure, but the throwing error being ruled on Pozo instead of Mason Wynn earning an error for failing to catch it, I think was spot on, because you don't have to skip that throw like the guy's trying to be tagged or something. It was a forced play at second. So just kind of a little bit of a, proof of concept where, yes, you can go for offense at times, but this was an example where the game just started to get away from the Cardinals. And you had another bunt instance back to Kyle Leahy where not a single person covered a bag. It was kind of brutal. I don't know if maybe people said, Leahy was, could have probably still made a play to first base and tried to hit Contreras on the run. But that nobody covered the bag, and whoever's fault it was, if it was Donovan was supposed to wheel around to first base or whatever the case was, it was just kind of one of those spots where you kind of felt the Cardinals coming apart a little bit at the seams. Do I think it's indicative of anything larger? No, I do not. I think it was just one of those weekends, and the Cardinals have won the vast majority of series that they've had over the past 6 weeks. So I wouldn't classify it as a worry, and I think they ran into a Rangers team, too, that again, had some aggression to get out. They've just played so poorly offensively. They are such a better offense when you look at the names in that lineup than what they have performed as on a season-long basis. And this was really the Marcus Semien wake-up sort of moment, because his season, you look at his numbers, it's just like, how in the world has he been hitting so poorly with the caliber of player that he is? But he had a great series, ended up with like 6 or 7 or 8 hits or something like that in the 3-game set against the Cardinals. He had 4 in the game alone on Friday, and then had another pretty nice day today. So it happens. I wouldn't say that it's something that I would consider to be overly concerning for the Cardinals. I saw some commentary from folks saying, well, no, it's just one series, but man, I'm really worried about the Brewers because they are hard charging and playing such good baseball right now, and just a game and a half behind the Cardinals. I will be the first to say, maybe not the first, but I'll make sure to repeat it, do not care. I don't care about the Brewers and what they're doing. The Cardinals have to win their series, period. It's too early in the season to be fretting about that, in the same way that it's been too early to worry about the Cubs, because we told you, they're going to have a record over the 3.5-week span from May 12th up to June the 6th where they're barely going to lose any games. I said they'd go 18-7, but they don't actually have 25 games to fit into that little window, but it's going to be that type of winning percentage, and they're going to gain a little bit on the Cardinals. The Cardinals are now 4 back. If they can stay within 5 before the 6th of June, I would still call that a success, because the Cubs just aren't going to lose. It's not that they're, this otherworldly team. They're playing high school teams. It just is what it is. The Cardinals will get their opportunities against some of those teams. They'll get to play the Rockies. They'll get to play the White Sox. Those series are coming down the line, and the Cardinals will get, some of those chances as well. And hopefully, we'll have an opportunity, as the Cubs are playing a more difficult portion of their schedule. The Cardinals may be an opportunity to gain games back. But I wouldn't worry about the Brewers personally. Just be looking at the Cardinals. Be looking at the fact that the Cardinals didn't score runs this weekend. Like, that is the one thing to watch. I don't think it's indicative that the offense is suddenly going to be bad the rest of the way. The Rangers, for all their faults on the hitting side, have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. 3.14, pardon me, I don't know why I said those words. I'm tired. 3.10 ERA for the Rangers on the season, which is second in baseball, leads the American League, behind only the Mets, if you're wondering, in Major League Baseball. They've been fantastic pitching. And, guys like Patrick Corbin, we saw earlier in the weekend, having a good season, 3.7 ERA, compared to just what he's been over the course of the last handful of years, just garbage. And he's been really good this year. deGrom, healthy, doing well. Eovaldi has, been pitching great. The Cardinals missed him because he's a little bit banged up right now, I believe. 2.80 is the starter ERA for the Rangers. Like, their rotation is legit. Jack Leiter has been pretty solid. Cardinals saw that version of him on Friday. It's just the nature of the beast, and I think the Cardinals ran into a team at their place pitching really well, and it's not just a small sample for their pitching staff. It's been, 2+ months of the Rangers just dominating, and once again, credit to Mike Maddox, because he's doing a very nice job, and his staff over there getting the most out of these guys, for sure. So that's really my takeaway. I don't think it's anything other than just, hey, the Cardinals had a rough weekend at the plate, but 4 runs in 3 games. You're glad when you have that type of output that you did at least win one. So that's really all I have as far as a takeaway from the weekend. Let me know, are you worried about the Cardinals offense, and how are you feeling about Erick Fedde? The 2 topics that I'm curious to hear about from Cardinals fans after the Cardinals drop 2 out of 3. Going to be really interesting to get back to the ballpark at Busch Stadium coming up on Tuesday. That series and homestand begins. It starts off with the Kansas City Royals, who, man, they finally had enough. They can't hit for nothing, and they decided to do something about it. Jack Caglione, their top prospect, gets the call reportedly, and so he'll be there in St. Louis on Tuesday trying to find a little bit more juice for that Royals lineup. They scored 0 runs against the Tigers and scored 1 run the day before that. So the Royals have a solid team, but they just cannot hit. They're kind of like the Rangers in a lot of ways, with the way that their season has gone so far. But the fact that the Royals have scored just 1 run over their past 2 games and still managed to win one sounds a little bit like how the Cardinals did it over the weekend in Arlington. But that'll be a big story of that series, the fact that Caglione is getting the call for the Royals. They couldn't have waited one more series, right? But no, that'll be fun for Cardinals fans, I think, to get a look at one of the top prospects. And I do believe this is going to be a week, as long as the weather cooperates, which it is supposed to maybe be stormy again in the middle of the week. So hopefully the Cardinals can dodge more raindrops. I'm just so sick and tired of talking about that, but it is just a fact of life at this point in time. But otherwise, I think you're going to get some pretty good crowds at Busch Stadium for this week, and then the weekend with the Dodgers coming to town, the Blue Jays early next week. So it should be a fun homestand as the weather hopefully begins to turn. At least it'll be warmer, if nothing else. And we'll see what Busch Stadium ends up looking like. The Cardinals still have been playing pretty well. They'll look to get back on the stick when it comes to just figuring out things offensively. That's all I got, though, for tonight in this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. No Down on the Farm today because I just have to get out of here. But we'll try to circle back on Monday's episode. Monday at some point in the evening, I'll get on here and update you on anything going on with the Miners. Drop something in the comments below if you'd like me to talk about it in Monday's episode because we won't have a new Cardinal game to talk about with the off day on Monday. That'll be the last one for a while, though, so strap in. It'll be a fun month of June as we're talking Cardinals baseball the whole way through. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. That'll do it, though, for this edition of the show. We will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.